You know why we've become a debtor nation. We've forgotten the Lord. This is what's happened over the last 40, 50 years. But anyway, you see the storm coming. Do you think we as God's people would be wise to stay at the picnic table? Or do you think we might be wise to make good decisions and get out of the way of that thing as best we can? So you say, well, how would I do that, Brother Russ? Well, you got to pray. Seek the Lord. In your own personal decisions where money is involved, sometimes you're just in the normal flow of things. You can handle that, obviously. But when you come to certain bigger decisions, you got to pray, get good advice, and always have the peace of God in your heart about decisions. Right now, and I've said this before, but really in the spirit of the Word, and as we're led by the Spirit, God's people should be headed for a debt-free day anyway. But it takes a little time to get there. What I would say in this climate, in the way things are, if you came and asked my advice, you're going to borrow a chunk of money, I would tell you not to do it. You say, well, Brother Ross, you don't know what need I'm talking about. Now, that could be true. So I can't just put everything under one umbrella, but you're going to have to pray and seek God, because this is not a climate to be borrowing a lot of money. And even in those advantageous situations, you need God's peace so that you'll be situated when this hits the fan. Look, you don't have to be a prophet to tell the nation you're headed for a reckoning. You don't have to be. This is common sense. It's like we've heard this a good while. I think we're, immune. What's the word I'm looking for? We can't feel it anymore. It's just a cloud. It's like, oh yeah, what's a trillion? Trillions, 20 trillion, yeah. It's like we've lost our bearings. Now, maybe you haven't, but it's like the average American, they don't really pay attention, I guess. Look, you can't build prosperity on debt. We're in trouble. We've got to, now here's what will happen when this thing hit, if the Lord tarries, and that brings me to another point, which, I don't mean to just stay on prophecy, but look, as we approach the end times, we know what the spirit of the world's headed for. They're headed for a global government. They're headed for the rule of Antichrist. They're not headed towards freedom. They're headed towards slavery. When the world's under Antichrist, that's not freedom. That is the ultimate in tyranny. He'll be putting millions of people to death. There won't be no religious freedom under Antichrist. Well, etc. But we're headed that way. See, so I don't know. This could be another part, another piece to the puzzle, so to speak, as the table is set for the Lord's return. So it's really amazing to me. Unfortunately, from what I'm, understanding, and perhaps I don't have the whole picture, but economic stress is already a reality for millions of Americans. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. The answer is to serve the Lord. You say, well, that sounds too simple. I'm telling you, if you serve the Lord, He will take care of you. And I don't have to be able to answer all the questions as to how He'll do it. He'll give us favor in the middle of a famine. Do you understand that? God will give us favor in the middle of a famine. He's done that in the past. So I would say to you, if you're discerning things and you look at the world, and look, there's a lot of things out of whack in America, but and the world, threat of war and all the rest. You look at that, you don't want to get nervous or afraid. What you ought to do is let this draw you to the Lord. You pray more. You seek the Lord. You have your confidence in the Lord. And if you haven't been drawing nigh to the Lord, then it's time. It's a sad thing to come to grips with the fact that your country has already sown to many unwise decisions and the harvest is rapidly approaching. So what's coming? I've got just a couple minutes here, so let me quote the insights of another advisor who wrote about this. This is a quote. He writes, it's in regard to what's coming. What's coming? Well, just before I share this information, there's two little things that interest me. And here I go. I'm going to be political again. God bless you. I believe that our current president's attitude towards Israel can bring some blessing on America that wouldn't have otherwise came. See, without that attitude towards Israel that says we're going to bless Israel, well, we could have lost some blessing. But see, when we bless Abraham, the Lord said, I'll bless those who bless you, Abraham, and I'll curse those who curse you. So I realized that this is something that has changed. Other times, really other administrations, plural, not just one, but there's been haven't always been that friendly to Israel, although America technically has been her friend. But when you purposely bless Abraham, the Lord said, I will bless those who bless you, Abraham. So while we're under a lot of stress, the Lord can hold that back, maybe more so than we realize, because we are blessing Israel. And some of you, you don't have a clue. You wouldn't understand a word I'm saying, but read your Bible. Do you folks understand what I just said? So I think there's some hope there. But again, back to the common sense and just the reality, even with the Lord's blessing, you know, folks, if we make a lot of unwise decisions in time, they have to be rectified. Bills have to be paid, or bankruptcies happen, and the reset button occurs, and all that economy that's been, say this is the stable economy here, and the credit economy that's been built on borrowed money, it's riding up here. Whenever this can't be serviced anymore, guess what's going to happen? It's going to come back down to where reality really is. And all the lifestyle that's been financed by the credit, that's the reset button. You say, what might that look like? It might look like the bank coming to get your car out of your driveway because you can't pay for it anymore. It might look like that, or other things. You say, well, what would we do? Seek the Lord. Put Him first. You know, the Lord knows how to work things for our good. He knows how to take things that are difficult. And by the way, the Lord uses financial situations to correct a nation, to correct us personally. I would always be paying attention to my circumstances, and if I felt like the Lord was trying to correct me about something, I'd be listening. Are you guys with me? See, He works through our circumstances, but also beyond that, God is able to take things that are meant for evil, work them for good. He knows how to work all things together for good to those who are the called of God according to His purpose. You know that famous verse. So while we analyze this and we try to be discerning, we're not going to be down in our spirit. Robin, we're going to have faith in God. But I challenge you as believers, disciples, be faithful, be wise. And right now, big decisions, you need to really seek God and make sure you have His peace about it. So what's coming? Well, some of these folks that you know, they just give out the stats and they throw stuff at you. I'm well aware of the fact that they think with the natural mind. That's not altogether wrong, because Book of Proverbs wisdom is wisdom for living in the here and now. And you can't get around that book of wisdom. You just can't do it. If you don't want to work, you're going to tend towards poverty. You know a lot of those verses. Well, that's real. That plays out in real life. So while they may not know the Spirit of the Lord, a lot of these fellas, whether they even realize it or not, they're really just espousing good old-fashioned Book of Proverbs wisdom. And as far as this temporal world is concerned, they learn how to have a few dollars. Brother Ron, they learn how to have a few bucks. Sad thing is they might gain the world and lose their own soul. That's the sad thing. But so as you listen for the practical, and how should that affect you in your decision making? What might happen? Well, here's the gentleman's opinion. He says, it's something like you've never seen before. You've never seen what happens when millions of people can't possibly pay their bills, when thousands of companies cannot refinance their debts, when confidence in our financial system or our government and our way of life evaporates overnight. I'm not talking about a bear market. I'm talking about a complete reset of our financial system. It's the only way forward. The debts we've racked up over the last decade cannot possibly be repaid. Now, you can crunch numbers and get a headache doing it. You don't have to take his word for it, but this is just reality. Those bills have to be paid. he said, did you, he touches on the reality again that corporately, countries borrowed $20 trillion in less than a decade. We've spent the money on a bunch of stupid stuff, he writes. Wars, share buybacks, worthless college degrees, inflated medical care, and lots of drugs. The bill is coming due, and there's no way it can be paid back. So whose pound of flesh is going to be roasted? That's his words, not mine. That's the question you should be asking. By the way, we'll begin to see all kinds of other warning signs, rising short-term interest rates and an inverted yield curve. That's a subject for another time, and I don't know much about it, but I get the gist of it. That's nothing compared to what else is going to happen next year, 2018, 2019. There's this horde of debt that's coming due. It's just, you know, it's coming due. It's like Harold, me and you borrowed money and we didn't have to pay it back for 3.5 years. So we've been living pretty good, but now we have the balloon payment. We got to pay back the principal. And we ain't got it. We need to refinance and you won't be able to. And this is a scenario that while every last company won't face it, there'll be too many that do. And this is going to, unfortunately, be tough to swallow. The gentleman writes, how do I know? Just look at the numbers. U.S. speculative grade companies owe $1 trillion before 2021. $1 trillion. That's less than 3 years now. There's zero chance this debt can be paid off or refinanced if there's an inverted yield curve. And that's why all of those firms are scrambling right now to finance these debts. Just watch the current efforts by hospital owner Community Health Systems to avoid defaulting on its $15 billion debt load. Now, this is a company, an example in the country. They've been trying to refinance during 2017. The company has no significant maturities until 2019, but they're trying to get the refinancing done now before it's too late. Well, you got thousands of companies trying to step in line and do the same thing. It's not going to happen. Not smoothly. Some will perhaps survive. Some will, obviously. So I'm concluding. I'm going to be quiet. Look at that. I've got 2 minutes to 8. I'm doing pretty good. The information that I've just shared is just current reality. And I know a lot of us, we don't think on these things very often. And like I said, I didn't want to bore you. But I think you should know. I think you should have your eyes open. The economy in America, in some regards, is doing good. That's always the case. You know, there's always an element. In the Great Depression in America in the 1930s, what was it? 70% of the people were still employed. Could you imagine a country today with 30% of our current population unemployed? By the way, the unemployment numbers today are so skewed, it's ridiculous. The numbers are way off. Same thing with inflation. You know, inflation is supposed to be low. You guys seen prices drop at the grocery store lately? I'm just curious. They going way down, Marie? I mean, you know, look, I was thinking the other day when I was a kid, Dad, how much did we pay for a hamburger back in 1960s? Was it 19 cents? 29? What was it? 25? I mean, I remember my first little cheeseburger that I can remember, Dad. It was in Chicago. You know, we stayed with Mamaw there for a while when he was in the Army. And Uncle Bill, he'd bring us home a little cheeseburger and fry, you know, from McDonald's, right? The Golden Arches, that was the big deal. You know, 25 cents for a burger? Well, let's see. Most of the time on the value menu these days, they're at least $1.69 or something. I don't know. You got the idea. Why is prices inflated? Well, that's a story in and of itself. But here's the deal. Things are they're just kind of snowballing. The inflation. I hate to say it this way. What else can you say, Brother White? I think we're just flat out being lied to. And the government has changed the way they calculate inflation 20 times over the last about 20 years. If they still calculated the way they used to, the inflation rate would have been 1.2% or whatever they're saying. I don't know. But I'll tell you what they can do. Now I'm going to get Harold mad. Because when they calculate that interest rate, the inflation rate, then they can keep it down. They don't have to give you much cost of living, you see. Amen. But, that is kind of in the mix, unfortunately. Now, will everything just blow up tomorrow? Well, not exactly. Will there be some problems for a lot of people? Evidently, yes. You know what my hope is? My hope is that if the country does experience some problems, that it can actually be a catalyst for revival. Most people won't seek the Lord until they're at the bottom of the barrel. As long as they're flying high, they don't need the Lord. But when you have some real difficulties and you say, boy, there's no place, like the old song says, where could I go but to the Lord? This is something else that the Lord, I'm sure, in His wisdom, He can orchestrate things as our sovereign God in such a way to bring these realities, not simply that people have a struggle, but that people will see their need for Him. So maybe that can happen. I appreciate you listening. Let's stand together and pray for your country. Let's pray for the country. I don't think there's any quick fixes. I'm not saying that, but I believe in the power of prayer, and I know the Lord can preserve us through much difficulty, and if He delays His coming, and there's tougher times to go through, and I don't know what that means. Look, like I just said, back in the Great Depression, 70% of the people were working. A lot of people didn't even know there was a depression, but a lot of people sure did. So let's be ready. Let's be wise. Let's seek God. Let's keep our eyes on Jesus. Let's keep Him first. Let's keep our faith in His promises. Let's be light. Let's be ready to love people. Be ready to touch people as the Lord opens doors.